I was very fortunate to grow up in a congregation whose senior rabbi, Rabbi Jerry Davidson, was a master preacher. He spoke with great intelligence and passion, and his sermons almost always focused on social justice, a woman's right to choose, the separation of church and state, civil rights. And with many of these sermons, all of us out in the congregation, we would nod our heads in agreement, and we would say very nice words of approval to our neighbors. And then we would go home, and we'd have our Rosh Hashanah lunch or our Yom Kippur break fast. And sometimes we would talk about the sermon, but more often we would just go about our lives and not much would change. I was very proud to have a rabbi who inspired me to consider the most important issues of the day. But I always wondered about the gap between hearing a sermon that motivates us and acting upon it once we leave. Our Torah bridges that gap between words and action with a single word. At the very beginning of the Torah portion we read this morning, God calls out to Abraham by name, as I mentioned, and Abraham's response is Hineni, literally translated as, "Here I am." Hineni is one of the most important words of the entire Torah. It's used when someone is called upon to turn from their usual routine and take an action that will change their life. When Jacob calls upon his son Joseph to look after his brothers, Joseph responds, Hineni. When God first calls out to Moses from the burning bush and tells him to go free his people, Moses responds, Hineni. This single word, Hineni, actually implies three powerful steps. I hear you. I'm listening with intention. I'm ready to act. Why do we come together to join a synagogue? Why, as autonomous individuals who are leading full lives, why do we do this? Yes, for Jewish ritual and learning and community, that's for sure. But it's more than that. Each of us joined this congregation to be part of something larger than ourselves. We want to have an impact on the world in a way that we never could have on our own. And that's especially true for me. As your rabbi, my greatest hope is that the words that we say, the prayers that we sing, the principles that we teach will spur us to make our values manifest outside of these walls. We desperately want to live in a world that reflects the values that we hold sacred. So this year, let's bridge that gap from hearing to action. Let me give you an example of what that looks like. An example of what it looks like when we act with common purpose as a congregation. All of us are aware of the worldwide refugee crisis. Millions have fled war zones in the Middle East and Africa and elsewhere. The civil war in Syria alone has displaced hundreds of thousands of people. Now, we Jews especially should have empathy for refugees. So many of our families hold memories of what it was like to be forced from our homes, to have to travel to a new land, desperately seeking a safe place. That's why I'm proud that in the past year, we did not only preach sympathy with refugees, we acted as a congregation upon this most important of principles. Temple Israel has joined with 6 other local congregations in an interfaith coalition to resettle a refugee family here in our community. Mohammed and his wife Noor and their 2 small children were forced to leave their hometown in Syria in 2011 when it was bombed by the Assad regime. That attack left 1,500 people dead, including many of their family and friends. The family fled to Alexandria, Egypt, where they lived in more than a dozen different locations within just a few years. They wanted a better life, so they applied to come here and were thoroughly vetted by the State Department. And they arrived in July. Since then, a team of over 100 volunteers has procured a home for them to live in, provided daily English lessons, and looked after every step of their transition. Their daughter and son, now ages 8 and 5, have started school. Mohammed, who has experience both in the import-export business and as a chef, is looking for suitable employment. They've started a new life. And we are committed to helping them feel safe and secure here, and to achieve levels of educational and personal achievement that so many of us already enjoy. Perhaps you've read news stories or heard reports about refugee resettlement efforts elsewhere. It seems to me that there's a common denominator in every single one, and that is that it's primarily churches and synagogues that create and sustain such initiatives. Simply put, without religious people willing to make their values manifest in the world, this would not happen. So I'm very proud that Temple Israel has helped resettle a refugee family. And if you would like to know how you can volunteer to be part of this effort, there will be a page on our website so that you can learn all about the family's needs and how you can help. Today, I also want to talk with you about another important way that we can make our congregation's values manifest in the world. The truth is evident to us all, particularly this Rosh Hashanah, that senseless gun violence has claimed far too many lives. The Jewish year 5776 was a particularly terrible year for gun violence. We witnessed mass shootings on a near monthly basis across our nation and around the world. There were countless other preventable gun deaths in homes, in public spaces, sometimes children even accidentally shooting children. Now, as your rabbi, I can no longer in good conscience stand in front of this congregation and lament these tragedies. I've done that too many times. Words were long ago deemed empty and pointless. They are, as Macbeth says, full of sound and fury, but signifying nothing. Words often fail all of us. How many times have we posted heartfelt sympathies on Facebook after a tragic event far away? It's nice, it's sympathetic, but chances are all of your friends already agree with you. And so we know that slacktivism, as it's called, is far from sufficient, and worst of all, it's disingenuous. Because if we really lament these shootings, if we truly feel as bad as we say we do, and if we really want them to stop, then let's do something about it. Sadly, none of us can stop a murderous rampage in Orlando or Charleston or Newtown. But we can make sure that right here in our own communities of Westport and Weston, that we build a culture of gun safety and responsibility. Let's put the strength of this congregation behind a principle that matters to us all: creating a safe community. Today, we launch an initiative to make Temple Israel a gun-safe congregation. In fact, Temple Israel is going to be the very first congregation anywhere, Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, to brand itself as a gun-safe congregation. I could recite all sorts of statistics for you. 31 Americans are killed each day by guns, 7 of whom are children or teenagers. A gun kept at home is far more likely to harm someone in that home than it is to be used in self-defense. And you might be saying to yourself right now, I don't own a gun. Okay. But we are all responsible for creating a culture of safety, a standard of behavior here in our congregation, in our homes, and throughout our entire community. At the same time, let me state clearly, I respect the Second Amendment. I respect those who choose to exercise their constitutional right to keep and bear arms. We just want to make sure that we're doing so safely and responsibly. So what does it mean to be a gun-safe congregation? There are several aspects, beginning here at our congregational home and radiating outward. And certainly every single one of us has a role to play in this effort. First, and I think this goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway, no one should feel a need to bring a firearm to Temple Israel. We have a trained security team here. We have an excellent relationship with the Westport Police Department. We review our security stance on a regular basis. Our congregation is safe. Second, if you own a gun at home, it should be stored safely under lock and key. As Chief Koskinas of the Westport Police Department said to me, there's absolutely no reason a gun in your home shouldn't be secured. And in addition, this is important, if you own a gun and it's properly secured, you should be properly trained in firearm use and safety. The Talmud teaches us that you can't have a dangerous animal at home and then feign surprise when your pet tiger attacks someone. Gun ownership is similar. If you're gonna own one, understand that it's a dangerous weapon and get yourself trained. In fact, all the members of your household should be trained too. I got myself trained in firearm safety with the help of the Westport Police Department just a couple of weeks ago. I wanted to be sure that if I ever had reason to handle a firearm, I would know how to do so safely and responsibly. If your rabbi can get trained in gun safety, then you can too. Next, let's keep our precious children safe. When we send our child to a neighbor's home, we need to ask whether there's a gun in the house. We need to ask whether it's safely secured. I know we don't live in a community where guns are a visible part of the culture, but I would bet that there are more guns around than we realize. So we have to start asking other parents about guns in their homes, even though it may feel nosy. And we have to keep asking that question until that question becomes a natural part of the culture of our broader community. One member of our congregation told me that she broaches this difficult issue by saying to another parent, "I want you to know we don't have any guns in our home." She finds that that opens the conversation in a non-judgmental manner. And by the way, if it turns out that there is a gun in that other home, she gladly invites a child to play at her house. Continuing to expand the circle outward. We will put the strength and power of this congregation behind sensible legislation and public policy initiatives that make our community safer. We're fortunate that Connecticut has some of the toughest gun laws in the nation, and we will work with allies such as Connecticut Against Gun Violence and the Connecticut Police Chiefs Association to continue to pass sensible laws that keep us safe. And even in an era of stretched budgets, we will support increased funding across all mental health services. We'll find opportunities to support sensible gun legislation in Washington too, despite the numerous obstacles that legislation often faces. And finally, we will continue to work with our interfaith partners to encourage manufacturers to bring smart gun technology to the marketplace. Our interfaith community organizing group has made gun safety a priority. However, in so many places around the world, legislation on guns is either blocked or ineffective. That's why we're aiming to mobilize the power of the free market to change the culture around firearms in our nation. It is astounding to learn that 40% of all guns are purchased using taxpayer dollars. Yes, local police departments, state troopers, state corrections, federal marshals, FBI, and of course the military together buy 40% of the guns sold in America. So our interfaith community organizing group, Congregations Organized for a New Connecticut is its name, is trying to use the collective buying power of the public sector to encourage manufacturers to bring smart guns to the marketplace. A smart gun is like your smartphone. It uses technology to ensure that only the legal owner can operate it. Bringing smart guns to the market will reduce accidental shootings, reduce the theft of weapons, and reduce the number of guns sold illegally. Smart guns would have prevented several recent mass shootings, including the one in Newtown. So far, over 100 municipalities nationwide, including here, locally, Fairfield, Bridgeport, Stamford, New Haven, and also several states in our nation, including Connecticut, I'm glad to say, have already signed on to this strategy, and so has the White House. We will continue to work to bring smart guns to market in the interest of public safety, in the interest of life, and we invite you to join us in this effort as well. As the Talmud says, if you save even one life, you have saved the entire world. So we're going to place these gun-safe congregation action steps front and center. In now becoming a gun-safe congregation, we aim to establish a standard that changes the culture of our entire community, that sanctifies human life, and that increases peace in the world. These particular issues, gun safety and addressing the refugee crisis, are important to me personally. And I've asked our congregation to take action on them because I've learned through many conversations that they are important to all of you as well. And I know that there are many other priorities on your mind. So we want to hear what they are. I invite you throughout this fall to take part in a series of intimate conversations that we will host in congregants' homes. I invite you to come and share a story about a pressure you might be facing or that your family is facing, or a story about a concern that you have for our community. We will listen to one another carefully, and based on what we hear, we will choose new priorities that we can act on together. You should look for communications about these conversations in the coming days. And please, make this a part of your new year. Some of you may have noted when you came in this morning that we recently placed a rainbow flag on Temple Israel's front door. Now, that rainbow flag doesn't change for a second who we are. Our congregation has long been committed to LGBTQ rights. Rabbi Orkan began officiating at same-sex marriages more than a decade ago, well before they were sanctioned by the state. But we put that flag up recently, and it's important today because that flag publicly states our ideals to all who would enter our doors. We can do that again and again and again in so many ways. So, dear God, as this new year begins, let us be part of something larger than ourselves. Let us be a congregation that says, Hineni, we're here, we're listening, and we're ready to act together. Let us be a congregation that changes our community. Let us be a congregation that makes our values manifest outside of our walls. Let us do all of this and more in this new year for the sake of life. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so.